I'm Laura. I'm 25 and currently going through a divorce. I moved in with my sickly grandmother roughly 2 months ago. She doesn't need full-time care, so mostly I just handle the housework and keep her prescriptions straight. She's lived in this same house for my entire life and tells everyone it's haunted. But we thought Nana was just being Nana. She's always been superstitious, but no, it's haunted all right. But before I start with the strange experiences, there's a few things to know. First, the house was built in the 50s, but it has only had 2 previous owners and there's no records of any deaths occurring on the property, natural or otherwise. Second, it's a small 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, and the walls are pretty thin, so we can hear everything. And finally, upon moving in, Nana advised me to cover the mirror in my room because it's the source of the haunting, according to her. Also, the mirror is part of an extremely large dresser that sits against the same wall as the door. It's made of real wood and takes a lot of people to move it. Okay, now we can start for real. Thanks to my diary, I started keeping track of the activity before I knew there was anything to keep track of. I'd had trouble sleeping the first couple of nights, but I'm having a really difficult time with the divorce. Of course, it was hard to sleep. On the 3rd night, I kept hearing Nana get up to go to the restroom at least a dozen times. Footsteps walked across her room, down the hall, and into the bathroom. Then, after a short pause, they would return to her room. I assumed that she wasn't flushing the toilet as to not wake me. The next morning, I asked if she was feeling okay, or if there was anything special I could pick up on the way home from work. When she asked why, I explained, and she said that she didn't get out of bed once the entire night, that I probably heard, in her words, the man in the mirror. I was late for work and I thought that she must be embarrassed, so I didn't press the issue. I did, however, begin sleeping with headphones. 2 days later, I woke up and, still groggy, walked past the dresser and caught a glimpse of a dark shadow standing on my bed. I screamed, turning to see nothing but an empty room. When I looked back at the mirror, it was normal again too. Since I was physically rubbing the sleep out of my eyes when I saw it, I chalked it up to Nana's stories getting to me. I've also had a few reoccurring dreams where a man calls to me from inside the mirror, but I don't want to officially include those among my possible encounters since they could easily be my imagination. However, for the record, I've never had nightmares like this before moving here. Things were quiet for over a week after the first Shadow Man incident. I had pretty much forgotten about the whole thing, but then it happened again. I was standing directly in front of the mirror, putting on my makeup, and I glanced down just long enough to make sure I got the right eyeshadow. Ladies, I know you know what I mean. That quick flash down and then right back up while you're leaning towards the mirror. I did that, and when I looked back up, there was a blurry oval shape, very head-like, hovering right behind my shoulder. I only saw it for a brief instant before screaming and turning, but it wasn't a fully formed shadow figure like before. This was more like strands of black fog trying to solidify into the shape of a head, but falling short. When I calmed down, I finally had a serious talk with Nana about the mirror. Before, I had immediately dismissed her stories without really hearing them, but now I was ready to listen. When Nana and Grandpa moved in, the house was empty except for that dresser and the attached mirror. Being such a bulky item, they assumed the previous owners didn't have a way to move it and left it empty for over a month, just in case they came back. It really is a beautiful set. This was after Mom and her 2 brothers were grown, so it was just Nana and Grandpa living there. A few months later was Thanksgiving, and they decided to move the dresser into their room. It took Grandpa, both of my uncles, and my dad just to slide it across the hallway. And they even told Nana, "I hope you like it because that baby is in there forever." Little did they know. They began hearing noises soon after. On multiple occasions, Grandpa got out of bed with his gun because he thought someone had gotten inside, but he never found anyone. Eventually, Nana saw a shadow figure crouched in the corner of the room, but when she turned around, no one was there. She saw it on 2 other occasions as well. Once when it was standing a few feet behind her, and once when it was sitting on her bed. Grandpa never saw it, but he witnessed the whole mirror shaking by itself while getting dressed one morning. By Christmas, they had seen enough and wanted it gone. Dad and my uncles were none too pleased with the development, but seeing how upset my grandparents were, they agreed to move it back into the guest bedroom. Only that wasn't good enough. They wanted it out of the house entirely. Unfortunately, they had barely been able to get potholders beneath the legs to slide it between adjacent rooms the first time. To get it outside, they would have had to pivot around multiple corners. Nana was so upset that one of my uncles measured just to confirm it wasn't physically possible. They would have had to take it apart and cut the frame to get rid of it. Even if they'd had the time, they didn't have the right tools. My uncles promised to do it after New Year's, but life got easier once the mirror was out of my grandparents' room, so it just never got done. They kept it covered with a blanket and would hear the occasional noise, but for the most part, they stayed out of that room and forgot about it. I'm the only other person who has actually lived in the same room with that thing, and now I also keep a blanket over it. Again, there was more than a week where nothing happened, but just as I let my guard down, I woke up to the sound of my music suddenly being turned all the way up during a particularly loud part. My headphones had done a perfect job of blocking out any nighttime noises up until that point, but I didn't want to sleep with them after that. Since then, I've woken up to the sound of a man crying, and I tried to record it, but the second I got my camera open, everything went silent. That was the last thing I've experienced so far, but I'm sure there will be more. I have no clue what this mirror's history could be or how to find out. I just know that I'm getting pretty close to buying a handsaw and dismantling this thing myself. My grandparents basically raised me, so growing up between the ages of 4 through 9, I spent a majority of my childhood living with them in their home in eastern Washington. It was what I'd call my happy place, but every once in a while I'd have to spend some time with my mom. I say have to because at this time she was no fun to be around. She didn't get clean until I was about 9, so things before that were always shaky. My resistance to seeing my mom, though, it wasn't all her. A lot of it had to do with her apartment. It sat in downtown Spokane, and it was a small one. I guess you'd call it a studio. There was really only one door, the front door. The bedroom was essentially the living room and the kitchen, but the bathroom, it was across the hallway. You'd have to leave the apartment and step across the way to access it. Each unit shared their bathroom with another one, though this didn't seem to be a problem since most of my mom's buildings seemed empty. The first time I stayed there, I remember being too scared to use the bathroom at night, so I just held it, waited for some light outside. This couldn't last, though, not if I didn't want to have an accident. One night, squirming in the pull-out bed, I tried to wake my mom up to see if she would go with me. She was unwakeable. She was snoring, and clearly in a deep sleep. After being patient long enough, I had no choice. I tried to make as much noise as possible, in hopes that those noises would wake my mom up, but it didn't work. I'd made it to the front door, and she was still snoring, so I ventured across the hallway, solo. It was only a couple of steps before you were inside the bathroom, but it seemed like miles. My stomach was all sorts of nervous to be standing between 2 open doors, so I tiptoed my way into the bathroom. With the light switch on the outside, I was able to turn the light off before entering fully, and then I closed the door behind me. I tried to make the whole thing as quick as possible. Everything was going well, but just as I was about to be done, the lights turned off. Sitting in the pitch black, I almost shit myself. which, considering my position, wouldn't have been the worst, but no, I was terrified. Completely frozen in position. Somehow I managed the meekest of sounds. I was attempting to say, "Someone's in here," but it was hardly a whisper. I tried again, and I was more successful, but the light remained off. I really wasn't sure I was going to ever be able to move. I was scared of the dark as it was, but here I knew that I was completely alone. 2 doors separating me from my mom, who was in a deep sleep slumber. It occurred to me that I was exposed to various strangers the moment I opened that door. Anyone could be out there. Still in the pitch black, I positioned myself to pull up my pants. Now slightly less exposed, I contemplated what to do next. Instantly, I went for the sink, and before I could even touch the faucet, I was flailing sideways, back towards the toilet, horrified by the image reflected in the mirror. In the darkness, I hadn't expected to see myself, but I saw something. At first, I couldn't distinguish male or female, but the hair was stark white, which matched the skin entirely. The figure wasn't looking at me directly, and even though I saw this image directly in the mirror, it was still too dark to see anything else. I instinctively looked behind me as I jumped to the side. The reflection had to be coming from somewhere, right? I was alone in there. This image remained in the mirror despite me moving away from the mirror. Its gaze held off to the side, not saying anything, not even really doing anything except seemingly floating within the mirror itself. Just a disembodied head of pure white. Only there were features. I could tell that whatever this was, at one time, it was a human, or it wanted me to perceive it as such. I started to feel a sense of dread. Before, I'd been scared, and then curious, and now I just knew I needed to get out of that bathroom. As I made my way to the door, avoiding the sink this time, I kept my eyes on the old white head staring to the side. But then, it looked directly at me, blackness where its eyes should have been. I don't remember if I screamed out loud, but I stopped looking at the mirror to focus on the doorknob. I couldn't see it, but I knew it was there. It was one of those pop locks. Just turn the knob from the inside and it unlocked itself. Only, that wasn't working. All I could think was that someone had to be holding the door or something. The strength I was using was everything I had. The door should have at least budged. Panic ensued, and by this time, I was crying, trying everything that I could now just to be heard. Couldn't someone just please open this door? Then, the lights flickered for a moment, but total darkness again. If heart attacks are possible at 7 years old, I was sure I was about to have one. But then, as I was hanging backwards with all of my body weight, holding the doorknob with both hands, feet against the wall for support, the door suddenly opened, and I fell backwards, hitting my head. The next thing I remember, I'm laying on the bathroom floor, fluorescent lights above my head, and as I sit up, I can see the door is wide open. I make a run for my mom's front door and thank the literal God above himself that it wasn't locked. I didn't need any other obstacles. I wasn't like a religious kid or anything, but I prayed that night. Instead of sleeping, I just literally prayed that I never experienced that again. I prayed that whatever that experience was, that I was safe, that my mom was safe, that God would protect us. I was making deals with God all night, basically, promising to never be bad, always tell the truth, join the Peace Corps. I'm sure that I didn't really have a clue what it was and that I actually called it Corps for the longest time, but clueless as I was, I just needed whoever was in charge to know that I seriously never wanted to experience that again. And I never did. My mom only lived there for that year, and I only saw her a handful of times. Her next place was arguably worse looks-wise in the area. It was horrifying for its own reasons, but at least it wasn't someone living inside of her mirror kind of horrifying. I still have no idea. Ghost, demon, what was that thing?